to Season 1, Episode 5 of Vixen, a Black Beauty and Pop Culture podcast. If you enjoy what you hear today, please leave a review anywhere you listen to podcasts. Today's episode follows Donyale Luna, the first Black supermodel to appear on Vogue, and really the first Black supermodel ever. Now, let's start the show. So actually, before we start the show, y'all, a couple quick announcements. I got a couple little comments, things to say. I want to say in last week's episode, I believe it was the Ananda Lewis episode, I said it was the halfway point for the season for the podcast. I lied. Sorry, y'all. I can't count. This is the 5th episode, and there are 10 episodes in this season. So today is actually the midway point. So there's 5 more coming after this, and I'm really, really excited for you guys to hear those episodes. I'm really, really proud of them. So I'm so excited to be at the halfway mark of the first season of my podcast. And I just want to say thank you guys so much for supporting me. That goes to friends and family, and also just you guys who follow me on social media, on my personal page, and on the Vixen Memoirs Instagram page. You guys have been super supportive. You guys have been sharing the collages that I make for the podcast. You've been sharing the podcast art, and it's just been really great. I've gotten a lot of feedback. I've gotten a lot of traction thanks to you guys doing that. So I want to say thank you so much for the bottom of my heart. Sorry, it's Sunday, it's early. From the bottom of my heart for doing that, and I really, really appreciate it, and thank you so much. If there's anything of yours that I can share to the Vixen Memoirs page, I do typically share people's stuff if you DM it to me, as long as it's appropriate, you know. But yeah, if I can share anything of you guys, please let me know. Please send me a DM at the Vixen Memoirs, and I'll be happy to reshare it for you. Thank you. So we are going to just get right into the show. This is a really good one, a little bit of a tearjerker for me. I really like this episode, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Can't hear my air conditioner in the background. I cut it off, but it's still just choosing to be loud. I'll try to cut it out as much as I can. If you can hear it, I'm sorry. Okay, so let's start the show for real now. In 1945, Peggy Ann Freeman was born in Detroit to Peggy Herzog Freeman and Nathaniel Freeman. Her mother, Peggy, worked as a secretary for the Young Women's Christian Association, and her father worked in a manufacturing plant. The couple had 2 other daughters, and Peggy Ann was their middle child. As a teenager, Peggy Ann was very involved in school, church, and local theater because she had dreams of becoming an actress. She started referring to herself as Donyale Luna at this time, and this is pretty much a look into who she'd become in the future because Donyale was known for fabricating a lot of parts of her life, so a lot of people don't really know what's true and what's not true. In a study by The New Nation, the relationship children have with lying is analyzed. It looks as if children are born honest, but that's only because they only know their own experiences and haven't had a lot of socialization yet. So basically what that's saying is when you're a child, like everyone knows kids are brutally honest, right, for the most part. But then as they socialize and meet other people and experience things, they start to realize that people don't always tell the truth, right? So the study goes on to say, as they continue to socialize with children and adults alike, they realize that people are capable of having different beliefs and different experiences, and that's when they start to realize that lying is an option. So most of Donyale's lies were based around where she came from. So she probably met people of different upbringings than her, and then it inspired her to tell lies about her origin. So growing up in Detroit, I'm sure in the 40s, it was very Black, extremely African-American city. So I think she kind of got inspired maybe by just meeting other people as she grew up who didn't have that background, and that is what made her tell lies about where she came from, but we'll get more into that a little bit later. So that was really just a part of Donyale's personality. Her classmates described her as a girl of staggering beauty and magnetism, and one of her sisters described her as a very weird child, even from birth, living in a wonderland, living in a dream. So Donyale's white lies could have come from a number of things, but most likely a desire to just escape where she was from. And it was also known that her father was an alcoholic and he was abusive to her mother, unfortunately. So that could have been a big part of Donyale's white lies. So we talked about how children learn to lie, but the New Nation study also says that what they're exposed to at home, the children, it influences the degree to which they practice lying. So Donyale probably witnessed her parents, and I'm surmising right now, but she probably could have witnessed her parents lying about the abuse and what was going on at home. So that could be another reason that she became known to tell tall tales, right? In 1963, Donyale was walking down the street in her Catholic school uniform on her way to a play rehearsal. She was already 6 feet tall at this time, so she was a pretty tall girl, and she was strikingly beautiful. Like, you guys got to look up photos of her. She's gorgeous. I'm going to post a collage. She's absolutely beautiful. Fashion photographer David McCabe, known for shooting stars like Andy Warhol and Twiggy, just happened to be on assignment in Detroit, actually, when he first saw her. So it was like a total, like, fateful incident. He says of the encounter, "I was struck by this almost 6 foot tall, beautiful girl wearing her Catholic uniform. She stopped to see what was going on." So she sees these people doing a photo shoot. So she's like, "Hey, what's going on over there?" So David ends up telling her who he is, introducing himself, and lets her know, like, if you're ever in New York City, like, and you want to get into modeling, I will help you. So Donyale ends up taking David up on his offer, and she comes to New York and calls him up. And David introduces her to Nancy White, who was the then editor of Harper's Bazaar magazine. And as soon as Nancy saw Donyale, she was like, oh yeah, she has to be in the magazine. So she had an illustrator sketch Donyale immediately, and the result of that was on the cover of the January 1965 issue of Harper's Bazaar. So this was the magazine's first time featuring a black model. Now, it is an illustration. Keep that in mind. If you look at it, I don't know if everyone would know that it's of a black woman. Like, when I look at it, I see a black woman, but other people might not. I don't know what you guys think. Look it up and see what you think. I'll probably post it on the Vixen Memoirs too. But, I mean, it's an illustration, so a lot of people probably don't know that this was their first time featuring a black model because it wasn't an actual photograph. So, anyway, after the magazine ran, David contacted Richard Avedon. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his last name right. He was the fashion photographer for Harper's Bazaar and Vogue. So David contacts Richard about Donyale and is like, you got to see this girl. You got to start working with her. So Richard sees her and does begin to work with her, and he signed her to a 1-year contract. So at this point, Donyale's 19. She's graduated, I believe. So she moves to New York City permanently at this time. So this is like the typical moving to New York, like, fascination with being in the city, right? I think people who are transplants from other places and move to New York, I lived in New York for 5 years. Like, that first year that you get to New York is incredibly, like, not to sound cheesy, but it's just very, very magical, right? So that's what Donyale's experiencing right now. I'm sure you guys can relate to that if you've moved to New York, or maybe it's similar when you move to other cities. But anyway, instantly Donyale was smitten with the city and felt a sense of belonging. In a letter she wrote to a childhood friend back home, she said, "New York is a dream. A man danced me down Fifth Avenue, and all up and down Broadway, men were eyeing and whistling at me. As soon as possible, I'll send you a picture of the new me. I'll be on top of the world if it takes every breath I have, every muscle of my skinny body. I feel it. I know it. I'll be some kind of star real soon. Real soon." So Donyale couldn't have been more on point about her destiny. Like, her career started to take off in New York. The partnership that she had with Richard was a success. He photographed her with Bob Dylan and a lot of other stars of the time. Media outlets across the country ran articles calling her the first black supermodel. So she became friends with people like Miles Davis. She went to all his dinner parties. Mia Farrow's one of her friends. Andy Warhol is one of her friends. And Sammy Davis Jr. So if you guys have not listened to the other episodes of Vixen prior to this one, especially the second one, Lola Falana's episode, put this on pause, go listen to that, and then come back, because you're going to see why we're keeping count of how many times Sammy Davis Jr.'s name comes up in this podcast. At the end of the season, in episode 10, we're going to count it up. I want to see if you guys are keeping count how I am, so I'm not going to say where we are yet, but yeah, we're going to talk about it. So yeah, Sammy Davis Jr. is also part of Donyale's story. Who would have thought? I mean, this man is everywhere at this time. But anyway, so yeah, she's attending private dinners. She's going to Motown parties. Like, she's just doing it all. Her life is super glamorous, and she definitely would be considered an it girl at this time. So all of this happens within 3 months of her moving to New York City. The difference between Donyale's modeling career and her peers was that she got to skip the rookie phase. So you guys know about, like, aspiring models. They hit the pavement, they go to go-sees, all these auditions and castings, long hours, that kind of thing. Donyale really didn't have to do anything like that because she was discovered by a photographer. So she kind of just got to just show up to stuff, right? And she booked it. So at this point, Donyale's truly living her best life, having a good time, but tragedy ensues very shortly after. Her mother shot her father after he came home drunk and threatened her, and he died from his injuries, unfortunately. To deal with the loss and the tragedy, Donyale turned to alcohol and drugs to ease her pain. It started off with LSD, which she loved. She described the drug as a reminder that she was capable of loving and being loved. So then she unfortunately graduates to more serious drugs like heroin. And after her mother shot her father to death, the pain of this really mixed uneasily with being an object of, rarefication and being a model. Like, it just was like probably the worst kind of mixture that one could put together. So David McCabe was asked about this period in Donyale's life, and he said that was the time she started to do things she shouldn't have. It was all very free-spirited. Everyone was doing stuff, LSD, and more harmful things. And she was also hanging out with some of New York's most creative people, Andy Warhol. Like, we already know the vibes with that. So yeah, peer pressure. Donyale's descent into drug use was surprising because when she first moved to New York, she didn't smoke, she didn't drink, she didn't do anything. And she was actually known for reprimanding models on set who, like, smoked weed and drank. Like, she was a little, she was fun, but she was definitely like, I don't do that stuff. So I think it was very shocking to people because they knew that girl, and then all of a sudden she's doing drugs like a lot of other people were. So, I mean, we all know the effects of peer pressure, and we know that the crowd that Donyale was hanging out with at this time. So her usage could have been heavily influenced by her famous friends, and unfortunately, that's just the reality for a lot of stars who develop addictions. But drug use aside, Donyale's career continued to flourish, and she continued to collect famous friends. She was one of the main creatives, artists, models, writers, you name it, who hung out at the factory, Andy Warhol's factory. And she was really one of the only black girls that were a part of that world. Andy took a extreme liking to Donyale. He took a lot of Polaroids of her, did a lot of screen tests with her, and she contributed to many of his projects. She actually was in his film Camp. That film came out in 1965. It's basically like a movie based on Andy's life at that time, but it's supposed to be funny, like it's a satire film. But yes, Donyale is in Camp. And this is something I found really, really interesting. Like, I wanted to make sure I mentioned this. So Donyale was actually a really, really integral part of the advancement of mannequins. And she's really considered the first black mannequin. So in the 1950s, plastic technology was really trying to advance. And it started to allow a little bit more for realistic figures, but mannequins really couldn't stand on their own yet. So in 1966, designer Adele Rootstein created the Twiggy mannequin, named, of course, after the Supermodel. And Adele had a knack for working with models right before they truly broke into the industry. And he made his Twiggy mannequin just as Twiggy was gaining popularity. So then he did it again, and the same thing happened with Donyale. So he worked with her like right before she took off. And he described Donyale as a colored, I hate that word, a colored New York model whose sinuous prow and extraordinary long-figured gestures made her the most sought-after catwalk model in Paris. He also credited Donyale with revolutionizing poses because she was known for she had really long hands, long arms, long legs, like so. her poses really kind of changed the industry. She was known for her feline stances. She really moved like a cat. That girl could pose, y'all. So yeah, I mean, she gets a lot of credit for that, and her and Twiggy are kind of known for bringing realism into the fashion industry. Before, it was like a lot of hands on your hips, stand still, look pretty, but I think that Donyale kind of added like a little bit more of more movement, and that's probably because she had that acting and dance background. So yeah, like when we see like models really given like all these different poses and stuff, that we can credit to Miss Donyale Luna. So at the same time, as all of this is going on, Donyale is experiencing racial prejudice in the modeling world. It's the late 60s, so you already know, going into the 70s. The photos that Richard took of her for Harper's Bazaar led advertisers from the southern states to pull their ads out of the magazine. So Deep South, Confederacy, like, they're not having it, right? So a lot of readers also wrote in to complain. They canceled their subscriptions. William Randolph Hearst, the owner of Harper's Bazaar, actually told Richard he was no longer permitted to photograph Donyale again. And Richard ended up quitting his job at Harper's Bazaar after 20 years with the company. So that's huge, right? For somebody who's a legend in the industry and has been working with this magazine for 20 years to take such a bold stance like that. And that move played an integral part in convincing editors to work with Black models. Back to Donyale's personal life. One thing that it's important to note about Donyale, and I want to make sure I talk about this properly with care, she often distanced herself from Blackness. That's just kind of what it is. Like, that's the easiest way to put it. She was known to constantly come up with different stories about her origin as well as her parental heritage. When she was asked about her heritage, she would sometimes claim to be from outer space or like just from like a bunch of different countries. So I actually don't know what race her parents really were. I think some people say that she was half white, half Black, but some people say that both her parents were Black. I have no idea. As a recognizable Black model, she was unable to escape racial bias and, well, Blackness in general. So, I mean, the thing about trying to distance yourself from Blackness is it almost never works, right? Because, unfortunately, people do see you for your skin. Pretty much, that's the first thing they see. So, I mean, like, you can't really escape Blackness in the sense that I think that the way that I think Donyale was trying to escape it. But we'll get more into that. So, because of this racial bias, Donyale decided to relocate to London to get away and continue to build her career as a model. She did not feel comfortable becoming a symbol of the civil rights movement that was going on around her. When she gave interviews, she dodged questions about race, upward mobility for Black people, for Black actors and models, or she answered them in a very, very neutral manner. She never was just like, don't associate me with those people, but I mean, there was definitely a clear attempt to try to distance herself. For example, in an interview with the New York Times, she was asked if her upcoming appearances in international films. So, for example, in an interview with the New York Times, Donyale was asked if her upcoming appearances in international films would be beneficial for Black actresses. She answered with, if it brings about more jobs for Mexicans, Asians, Native Americans, Africans, groovy. It could be good, it could be bad. I couldn't care less. So, I mean, y'all see the attitude there. So during her time in London, she avoided any involvement with the civil rights movement that was raging back in America. And when people asked her like why she moved away from America, she said, I wouldn't have to be bothered with political situations when I woke up in the morning. I could live and be treated as I felt without having to worry about the police coming along. I mean, no shade to her, but to me it's always funny in a sad way when people think that they can like move somewhere else and like they don't have to be worried about politics or race. It's just like, I mean, wherever you go, you could move to Antarctica and race is going to play some kind of position at some point, you know? So it's just like, escaping race, it's just, I mean, it's impossible as long as you live in your skin, right? But anyway, back to the story. Obviously, comments like this didn't really make her likable to the Black community, and therefore she didn't really have the support of the Black community at that time because, you know, the civil rights movement, it was very heated. People were very passionate. So you being a prominent Black woman, mixed race woman, whatever you want to call it, and you're kind of like dismissing the movement, it really wasn't, you know, it wasn't a good look, right? So she didn't really have the support of the Black community. So this is kind of sad because she made a lot of breakthroughs in her career, and her accomplishments were kind of built cohesively beside the civil rights movement. And speculation on my part, but this could be part of the reason why she isn't really known as the first Black supermodel. I think that her distancing herself from Blackness could be part of the reason why she's written out of a lot of history. I mean, I heard of her years ago just scrolling on Tumblr, and people would post her photos. But, you know, Tumblr, there weren't a lot of, like, long-form posts about who people were. They would just kind of post the person's name and the photos. So it was just, like, I didn't really know that she had done all of this and had accomplished all of these things. But I do wonder if the distancing from Blackness played a part in, you know, why a lot of people don't know her name. So Beverly Johnson is typically referred to as the first Black supermodel, and as the first Black supermodel to appear on the cover of Vogue. And that could probably be because Donyale's, when Donyale appeared on Vogue, it was British Vogue, but Beverly's cover was American Vogue. And, you know, some people place more importance on on American Vogue than any other version. So that's probably why. But Beverly's cover was actually 8 years after Donyale. So technically, Donyale really is the first Black model to appear on Vogue. Naomi Sims was on the cover of the November 1968 issue of Ladies' Home Journal. And a lot of people consider that to be the first major cover with a Black model. And also, so I think, like, because Beverly Johnson, Naomi Sims, that, you know, people don't really recognize Donyale because of those covers. And also, another reason that people might not have heard of Donyale is because she did pass away very young, which we'll get to, and she didn't really get a chance to create a solid legacy. In an interview with the New York Times, the reporter mentioned to Beverly Johnson that Donyale paved the way for her, and Beverly was clearly annoyed, and she said she doesn't wear shoes winter or summer. Ask her where she's from. Mars? She went up and down the runways on her hands and knees. She didn't show up for bookings. She didn't have a hard time. She made it hard for herself. So, I mean, what Beverly's saying, a lot of people probably felt that way. And then along with the distancing herself from Blackness, I think that's why she's forgotten from the conversation. So another theory is just that Donyale was ahead of her time. And even though in the 60s there were some working Black models, the Black is Beautiful movement, like, you know, the afros, you know, Afro Sheen, those, you know, commercials that we see with the girls with the big, beautiful afros, that didn't really start to gain momentum until, you know, the 70s, like mid-70s. So things were just a little different. It seems like there wasn't a whole lot of space for them at this time. But that changed a lot because of the battle of, I always say this word wrong, I think it's Versailles. Versailles? Y'all know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so the Battle of Versailles in 1973 was a fashion show held at the Palace of Versailles in Paris to raise money for its renovation. So basically, 10 designers went head-to-head, 5 French, so it was Yves Saint Laurent, Givenchy, Christian Dior, and 2 others, and they went head-to-head with 5 American designers, which included Oscar de la Renta, Anne Klein, and Bill Blass. So basically, the fashion show to raise money for charity, the French versus the Americans. And the American designers ended up winning the battle, which was important at the time because American designs actually were known to imitate French designs. So each side, the French and the American, got to have 11 models each. And 8 of the American side's 11 models were Black women. So that was a huge deal. Barbara Summers, who I want to do an episode on, she's a former Ford model and she became a writer and an editor. wrote that the show caused a major reversal in how the fashion industry looked at black women. Throughout the 1970s, more black models started to become visible in both runway and print. So back to Donyale specifically, and Donyale was in that show, by the way. Forgot to mention that. So back to the story. I briefly mentioned that Donyale moved to London to further pursue modeling, and this is where she got her first big break. In March 1966, Donyale became the first black model on the cover of Vogue, which we talked about a little bit, and that cover was shot by David Bailey. And the shoot was actually inspired by Picasso's portraits. Vogue's editor, Beatrice Miller, said this about choosing Donyale to be on the cover. She happens to be a marvelous shape, angular and immensely tall and strange. She has a kind of bite and personality. Naturally, Donyale's career started to really blow up as soon as the issue went into print. She became one of the most in-demand models in the world. She worked with Yves Saint Laurent, Valentino, Paco Rabanne, and Donyale was actually the model that Paco chose to present his famous I say this word wrong too, the Rhodoid dish dress. So you guys look that up. You guys are going to know what this dress is as soon as you see it. But yes, very iconic design that is still being copied to this day. Donyale was actually the first person to ever wear the original. Fun fact, Paco Rabanne is actually the same designer of the dress that Jeanette Chavez, the video vixen, wore in the Excuse Me Miss video with Jay-Z. Fun fact. So at this time, Donyale was also a frequent visitor to the artist Salvador Dali's home, who called her one of his muses. Later in 1966, Time magazine profiled Donyale and said, "She is a creature of contrast. One minute she's sophisticated, the next fawn-like, now exotic and far away, now a gaming from around the corner." So Pat Cleveland, who is also a model and a friend of Donyale, said to Telegraph that at this time, when Donyale walked into London restaurants, people stopped eating, stood up, and applauded. That is hilarious. She said she was like a mirage or a fantasy. It's a long-standing rumor that Jackie Kennedy actually saw Donyale in a nightclub once and walked up to her and told her she was beautiful. So, however, at this time, Donyale is still suffering from a drug addiction. She moved in with actor Klaus Kinski in 1969 in London, and he actually ended up throwing her out because her drug use was so excessive. And of course, naturally, her work was affected by this, so Donyale was frequently missing bookings at this time. So things are kind of going a little bit downhill. Around 1968, Donyale accepted a part in the Fellini film Satyricon. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And she moved to Rome to start filming. So she ended up staying in Rome after the movie wrapped, and she later got another part in another Italian film, Salome, in 1972. And at this time, she met Luigi Casanaiga, who was an upcoming photographer, and he actually shot Donyale for Playboy's April 1975 issue. Later that year, the two got married, and their daughter Dream was born in 1977. The couple unfortunately separated shortly after Dream was born, and then in 1979, Donyale unfortunately passed away from an accidental heroin overdose. Really dislike that this is a common theme, but unfortunately, similar to last week's episode with Nicole Narain, there is a lot of stuff about Donyale's early life that is unknown, and really her life in general, even as she became a superstar, because as we mentioned earlier, she wasn't always very clear about her past. It's even said that her husband didn't know that her father was killed by her mother until after Donyale passed. He thought there was another, cause of death. Her age and race are also other things that are uncertain. It's thought that she was 34 at the time of her death, but she also could have been like 33 or 32, I read. No matter what, I see Donyale's cover-ups and elusiveness as a method for survival. More so just, in a world that she needed to protect herself and, have a strong armor. I also think that people who suffer from drug addiction are typically swept under the rug, forgotten about, not talked about, and I think that is also a big part of why a lot of people have never heard of her, even though she really was the first Black woman to appear on Vogue. So that is Donyale's story. She was the first Black woman to appear on Vogue, really the first Black supermodel, and definitely a legend in her own right. And it's really unfortunate that she died so early in life before we got a chance to see what she really, really could do. I'm going to end on a quote from her daughter, Dream. So in April 2019, Donyale's daughter, Dream, wrote a piece on her mother for Vogue's website. And she said, "She leaves behind a great story, one that I am proud to tell my daughters. On May 17th, it will be 40 years since my mother left us. On that day, I will honor her legacy and reflect on her memory with my family. Most of all, though, I will be hoping that the world is finally ready to celebrate a young African-American girl from Detroit who didn't let others define her." In the end, these pages contain many of the real facts about her extraordinary life, and this is how she deserves to be remembered at last. Thank you guys for listening to another episode of Vixen. I hope that you guys enjoyed Donyale's story, and I will see you guys next week for an all-new episode on Wednesday.